We were becoming more and more, as so many people are, aware of, the huge problems of climate change and biodiversity that is hurtling towards us. And there are various things, we started trying to do in our own little way to make a difference. But then, because of our experience in the arts and in community activity, we thought, is there a way, and this was Liz's idea originally, is there a way to help bring people together so they can talk and discuss the problems ahead of us? So the idea that we would have this weekend where the arts and the science and the whole looking at the natural world, you could, they could bounce off each other and hopefully inspire people and energize people that within their own communities they can work together and just try and shift opinion and gradually move things forward. Liz and I are organising this little festival which has got lots of music. To tell you the breadth of the music, the main Saturday night concert starts off with Bradley Cressick, who is the leader of the Northern Sinfonia, playing the Lark Ascending with a small youth ensemble, strings. Then it goes to Nancy Kerr and James Fagan, so folk music. Then there's a poet, and then there's the two main people out at Maximo Park, which is an indie band, so it goes from classical to indie rock in one night. Which some people probably will hate, but never mind. We're going to have a good time. Nearly killed us put it together, so you want to take one of those and tell your friends. The Lark Ascending, of course, is, was written in a time of trouble. It was written, during and immediately after the First World War. But it was the lark giving hope. And of course, in Northumberland, you can still hear the larks. You can hear them from my garden. But there's large parts of England where you can't hear the larks anymore. So again, it's this, let us celebrate what we've got and let's make sure we don't lose it. But, it's all to play for because, it has been calculated that if the whole country just ate 30% less meat, so if you eat meat 6 days a week, I'll have it 4 days a week. That would free up sufficient land because we grow so much grain to feed to animals to feed us, that if you just grew that grain to feed straight to us, we could be self-sufficient. It's not a big difference. It's a fairly significant difference, but it's not, if we did it over a few years, it's not impossible. It's not, we don't have to all go vegan. Yeah.
Is living in a van a phenomenon over here? People live in vans. And when you sit down with a producer and you say, hey, I've got this song I want to record, and he says, well, what's the song? And you say, well, it's a 15-minute long talking blues about living in your van. He says, can we cut it down to 5 minutes? And you say, no. He says, well, he doesn't say anything. He just gestures to the Grammy at his desk. I'm a public park patron. I'm a library sleuth. I'm a thrift store grifter, a western suits, bringing out 3 chords and the truth like a wash rag on a bar. Every time I'm feeling down on my luck, think I might trade it in for a couple of bucks. Here's some guy like Elon Musk talk about how we're all gonna get cyber trucks. I thank God life must be easy when you're one of these dang billionaires.
I think if you're a contemporary writer and you're not writing from a position of acknowledging climate change as like a background fact, then there's something mistaken about what you're doing. Not every song, of course, has to be about climate change. That would be a pretty boring music world, right? But the impending climate catastrophes that are said to be happening or to be about to happen, I think should be in the back of people's minds on a nightly basis. I want there to be songs about shaking your booty and about kissing someone you like and just about everything fun and dumb in this world. But I also think that it's important to bear in mind not only our regular mortality, but the impending suffering of others that is also like pretty avoidable, and to try to maybe cultivate some compassion ahead of time. There are a lot of varying opinions, and while I think our public policy might suggest that there's a monolith of people that don't care, there are tons of people that do, and we just have to mobilize our resources. Yeah.
And this song is dedicated to the Universal Bubba, or anybody that drives around in their truck and helps out hapless people. I believe that the Universal Bubba exists in Manila and Manitoba, Manchester, as well as Manhattan. There's always somebody out there to help you. And the reason I say that is because I don't think I've ever been in a city and been SOL and had somebody not actually like give me a hand. You know, I think there's something about human nature where we like to think that there's like evil people out there to get us, but the reality is when you're actually in the situation, usually people are pretty nice. So usually that kind of guy, the Universal Bubba that I'm referring to, has a bunch of crazy stuff that's in their head that they say all the time. You know, they start running their mouth in the morning, and then it makes a long day of hard work a lot better because they just started talking at sunup and didn't stop talking until sundown. And well, as you can tell, I idolize the Universal Bubba.
I think that we should try to sing for love and joy and death at the same time, and I think that the stakes are high enough that it's worth singing about, period. I hope it is. I don't trust apolitical folk music. It doesn't mean everything has to be political, but if I can't figure out if you're working towards something or have an ideal, well then what's the point? We could all just play, literally just play old songs, or fake old songs, or do fake nostalgia in cool costumes until it all goes to hell.
Gentlemen, and I'm pretty sure that I prefer the van life. I've been told this, it's a fine life. I've been sold this, it's a fine line between having to and choosing it. Let's roll it up.
Folk music in particular, it's about, and having said that, I think it's becoming increasingly true because of streaming, is that the main way you're going to make money, and the lower down the food chain you are, that is even more important. It's like that troubadour tradition. You've got to travel to play because you've got to perform to earn a living. And I think that obviously the folk world has always been like that to a degree. I think that there was a time when, you know, I mean, Martin Carthy still does it. I mean, he plays solo shows and he goes on public transport. But, you know, when you know, there's a couple of you and you've got equipment, you've got to have, you know, you can't do it on public transport. It's as simple as that. I mean, we've kind of perfected the art of how to get 3 grown men and all our equipment into one small family hatchback, you know. Times are hard and times are poor, there must be more to life, I'm sure. Flying moves off from the door, no chance of a payday. Oh no, you never know how far you'll fall. There's a bigger issue at the root of it all that's way above kind of our pay grade, which is obviously that issue of, you know, the whole issue of streaming and fair payment for musicians for their work, because obviously if you're not getting sort of a decent bite out of like the streaming world, then again that increases the pressure on you to play concerts. So I know that like we've played concerts in recent years that really we maybe wouldn't have played even 10 years ago because, you know, we didn't need to, but there's a squeeze where even like things like Brexit, where, you know, we used to sell like sort of, you know, a certain amount of CDs every year into Europe, and now we can't, because we, you know, if we want to sell, we used to do particularly well in Scandinavia for some reason, and we don't have the time to deal with that level of admin, and so we've just had to pull all of our sales from Europe. So there's these squeezes that come in that kind of are forcing musicians to be even more kind of, you know, do more shows, and shows that, you know, are probably not a great thing to be doing in terms of like the distances that you're traveling for, both for you physically, personally, mentally. But again, it's that issue of like sort of, you know, reducing what what you were pumping out into the environment and cutting across the country for shows that really you're doing to make up for other revenue sources that you lost.
Won't gather round, won't you listen, please? This is the sound of a storm at sea. This is the sound of the wind through trees. This is the sound of the falling leaves.
Maybe folk music and needs to kind of look at the model a bit again.
Yeah.
So I have no problem whatsoever with people sort of saying, well, okay, we've kind of created a genre here that's got these sort of certain aesthetic qualities. And if you accept that, and there's a bit of an industry built around it, then why shouldn't people add to that canon? And in that respect, then why the hell shouldn't people take an aspect of that kind of tradition of radicalism or speaking out against things and confront it from modern challenges and modern issues? But having said that, we rarely, we don't like to beat people over the head with it.
Sure.
We're quite subtle in it, because I've always found that kind of, if you are sort of being too polemical, you very quickly start to draw an audience that you're speaking to a vacuum because they're coming because they share your views. Mm-hmm. Whereas in actual fact, if you're more subtle about it and more gentle about it, then you can perhaps kind of, in a battle of guerrilla warfare, you can sort of maybe influence more people by just kind of slowly creeping in with stuff.
Well, a carpenter lived not a mile off from here, been a little too fond of the taste of his beer. So hard up for brass, though it's true on my life. For 10 shillings down, yes, he auctioned his wife. He auctioned his wife. He auctioned his wife. Hey! Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? Sleep happy tonight.
Thank you. So we're going to get a bit weird now. So I've come from quite a strange background. Usually a musician would have maybe a degree in music, but I have a degree and a master's in behavioural science. So my music is quite heavily influenced by the environment and nature, and it's just something that I've always loved. As a kid, I was outside all the time, and it's something that I like to implement into what I do. And I also think that the main source of the actual problem with climate change is a behavioural issue. And obviously behavioural issues can be, changed through exposure of information. There are many things that you can do as a musician. So obviously one thing would be bring in a reusable water bottle, to every kind of gig. People don't realise, but you can actually recycle guitar strings. Like there's so many things that you can do, but people just aren't aware of them. So I guess it's more about talking about that. But I am aware that it's more about making your impact minimal rather than completely eradicating it, because due to the system that is kind of impossible. So I think some change needs to be around that as well. Recently, I have noticed a change in, the way that events kind of, provide that kind of care for the artists. So I think it was Walk the Plank. I played a gig under their name, and every meal was vegan. They had like reusable, like plastic cups. I know it's plastic, but but it's a start, isn't it? And it's just preventing waste that's completely unnecessary when there's so many things that are reusable. It's just so easy just to give the artist vegan food rather than putting like kind of like unnecessary things in there that impact the environment. So yeah, I just think it's something that should be implemented everywhere, to be honest, and I think that's how greater change will be made.
It'll be worth it. So, this is the Lancashire lads.
Well, it was last Monday morning, I have heard them say, orders came from Manchester, we're bound to march away. Well, the Lancashire lads have gone abroad, whatever shall we do? Leaving many a pretty bird may cry.
There's people out there that are doing it, but sometimes you even wonder, like audiences who sometimes are not open to messages as well. I've had it before where, I've played at folk clubs and some people have said, don't get too political, and it's like, I'm performing at a folk club, it kind of comes with the territory. But I can kind of understand that maybe if you're going out to be entertained, maybe you don't want to be preached at, I guess, but do you say nothing? And I don't know, I think sometimes you've got to say, if it's something that you think is important, you have to say something. So
yes, I think the essence of art, in a sense, is in many cases has made changes and things and brought things such as environmentalism, sustainability and things to the forefront. So
yeah.
I think it is important in a way.
So just got to keep saying it until someone listens, I guess.
Well, I did a roadie for the Manchester metal scene, and I think when it comes to tours, there's obviously carpooling, and when you've got a van full of bands, but obviously I do know people who have talked about environmentalism and sang about environmentalism and sustainability, such as our friend Simon Peter, who's over in Sweden. He cycled from Sweden to Preston in Lancashire during the fracking and the protests about the fracking in Lancashire with no money whatsoever, so he travelled all that way, and then with the help of other people. So if his bike broke down, he would explain what was happening, and people would fix his bike for free and give him food and stuff like that.
I gave him guitar strings.
Bossy gave him guitar strings. So
yeah, it was busking to continue his journey, and I think he'd broken a couple of guitar strings. He'd been soldiering on with like 5, then 4, and then he got down to 3 and realised that he perhaps needed a few more guitar strings. But anyway, he explained what he was doing. I was like, oh cool, just have some guitar strings, it's fine. But he's just great, genuine guy and a nice performer as well.
Indeed, he sings about recycling and stuff like that, and it was quite excellent it's such a feat to get for it to cycle from Sweden to Preston on its own, but also for such a good cause as well.
The Lancashire lads have gone abroad, whatever shall we do? I'm leaving many the pretty fair maid crying, oh what shall I do? For the Lancashire lads have gone abroad, Whatever shall we do? Leaving pennies a pretty fair make crying, oh, what shall I do?
In an age of total mechanical and digital reproduction of all things, it feels intuitive to me to look to music that is pre-industrial in some ways, because it can encourage us to adopt or at least respect ways of knowing and ways of learning that predate total digitization and mechanical reproduction of everything. I think that we live in a time where everybody can have access to all information, when global poverty could be eliminated, global extreme poverty reasonably quickly, and that public will generally has to be there. But we have small supercomputers inside of our pockets that are designed to be gambling devices to alienate ourselves from our most important and most human impulses and to act selfishly. Not all the time, and in some ways we use these things to connect, but at the end of the day, most of the motive is a profit motive, right? As we create digital avatars that are supposed to be more like us than we truly are like us, I think it's nice to go back to music that says, here is what we have been, here is what we can be in the future, here is a part of a troubled history, bloody backwaters that we're going to wash downriver from. Into either a bright, beautiful ocean or off of a damn cliff.